Welcome back to the 127 Fit podcast. Today's guest is the Senior Director at Beauty Counter. She's a mom, a healthy living advocate, and a lover of books. Today's guest is Becky Glaze. Becky, I want to welcome you to the 127 Fit podcast.
Thank you, Quentin. It's exciting to be on here.
For sure. So, Becky, I'm excited to have you as a guest today, and we're going to just kind of dive into some different topics today, kind of focused on healthy living and toxins. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. But before we kind of get into that, I've got a few questions just as part of kind of a warm-up to get the ball rolling in regards to our conversation. So the first question that I have for you today, Becky, is how do you start your day? Do you have maybe like a specific morning routine that you like to stick to on most mornings?
So I'm a mom of two little ones. So I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And to be absolutely honest with you, since I had my little ones, I have not had a very specific routine. Right. I would say that the one thing that never changes is I drink a quart of warm lemon water every morning upon waking up. And that does not deviate. That's like a no-brainer. So as soon as I wake up, I usually let my kids wake me up. Which as they've gotten older, that means I wake up later. Okay. Yep. But I'm also more of a night owl. And then one thing I have really tried is to not look at my phone as soon as I wake up, to just let my day start a little bit and then dive in, because I can just end up down that rabbit hole of answering emails and taking care of things. So
Cool. So in regards to the quart of lemon water, is that just kind of like a rehydration tool to kind of kick off the day, or is there something else that kind of helps you with?
It's absolutely to kick off the day. I mean, since I was young, my parents were very into health and wellness, and that was something that they always did. And the idea is that your body has been resting all night, and it's dehydrated, I want to wake up my organs gently, and I want everything to flush out. I want glowing, healthy skin. I want to rehydrate my body with something that lemon water is alkaline. And so just that idea of really helping start my day right. I know a lot of people, I'm always chastising people for starting their day with just coffee. Right. I'm like, start with at least just plain water. For sure. So, and I notice a big difference. Like my body craves it when I wake up. Mm-hmm. And so all those things, I think just waking everything up with hydration is really important. For sure.
Yeah. And I agree 100%. I have like 10 ounces of water when I wake up. Not immediately, but as a part of my first meal, the first thing I ingest, and then I have some like pink Himalayan salt and some collagen in there too. But definitely the water for hydration is great. Great way to start the day. So the second question that I have for you is, and in the introduction we have lover of books. So if you have more than one, if I'm sure you do, please share. But is there a favorite book or a book that you like to gift often?
So when I saw this question, it was really hard for me. I do love books, and I'm in a book club. I've been in a book club for like 9 years, and it's the same group of girls, and we read all kinds of stuff. It was very difficult for me. So in the world of fiction, I love historical fiction, specifically surrounding like World War II. But I also really love encouraging business building books. I love reading Brene Brown. So I loved her book, Dare to Lead. I also read the Bob Goff, Everybody Always, Love Everybody Always. Such a good book. I think I don't have one in particular that I'm like, this is the one. I think I just love reading all the different types of books that are out there. Yeah. So I think surrounding fiction, that is fun and kind of gives me that escape. Mm-hmm. And then also that challenging my thought process, my mindset, the way that I operate my life is really, really key for me.
For sure. Great. No, that's awesome. I know reading is very, very powerful, and it's a great tool to have in our toolbox. So now again, for this next question and then also the last question, if there's more than one, again, just feel free to share. But is there a favorite quote or mantra that you have, or that's played an important role in your life at some point?
Yeah, this quote has stayed with me for over a decade, just something that was really powerful the first time I read it, but it's a Herman Melville quote, and it's, "We can't not live for only ourselves, 1,000 tiny fibers connect us with our fellow man." And it just, I think what speaks to me with that is that everything we do, it has a ripple effect. positive or negative, and just that idea that we are connected by like 1,000 tiny fibers to all of humanity. And so living my life in a way where it's everything I'm doing is how is it impacting not only my life, my family's life, but my community and the people that I come in contact with, and that there's always going to be an outgoing and a return.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a powerful quote. And who did you say that was by again?
It's Herman Melville.
Okay, cool. Very cool. So the last question, Becky, is there a favorite or most listened to podcast that you have?
This is another hard one because I love podcasts, but I will say the one that I really, really enjoy, and I think is just particularly resonates in this season of my life is, well, there's two actually that I've really loved, and they're kind of on two different ends of the spectrum. But one is How I Built This by NPR. I just love it. I love hearing people's evolution stories of how they've built their businesses. I think it's always fun to kind of see the behind the scenes of what looks like that rose-colored glasses of a business, and then you learn the real struggle and heartache that went into getting it to where it is today.
For sure.
And then I also love Don't Mom Alone podcast by Heather McFadden.
Okay.
And it's just a really encouraging podcast. It's just perfect for me as a mom, and I think the different people she interviews, anywhere from, all different walks of life, and just encouraging in that season of raising the next generation.
Absolutely, that's beautiful. All right, so we're gonna just dive in a little bit to your backstory, your background, kind of, if you don't mind sharing, Becky, with myself and the listeners. Kind of how was childhood? Where did you grow up? Were you involved in sports or extracurricular activities? And then just kind of like high school, and then maybe if you want to touch on college, and then we're going to just kind of dive into kind of like where you're at currently and what you have going on. So just touch on your childhood a little bit if you wouldn't mind.
So my childhood was very unique. Every time I tell people about it, they're like, this is crazy. It should be a book. So I have 6 siblings. So there's 7 of us in the family. My parents have been married for over 41 years. And we grew up very much a non-traditional childhood in the sense that we lived in the country. We went to one-room schoolhouses. It was grades 1 through 8, and then sometimes it would split off to higher grades, and parents were involved in the teaching, kind of whatever their strengths were, and it was a very unconventional education. We always were able to run free. We did a ton of camping. I was not involved in sports. I was very involved in music. I played the piano. Like my sisters sang, and so we just had, it was much more involved with nature and hiking and camping and backpacking and exploring and just kind of freely roaming around in the areas.
Free range, right? Free range?
In a way, yes. In a way, very much so. I think just the non-traditional schooling lent itself to that, and I think the areas that we lived were rural. There weren't really schools. My parents are very conservative Christians, and so we weren't going to go to public schools, and they wanted us in more of a conservative environment. And so the communities rallied together, and they put together these schools. And so it was very unique and very different in just even my education platform, which I think lent itself to, do I have the confidence to pursue college? Do I have what the credentialing that I need to really take it to that 4-year college degree? And ultimately I did. I was able to, and I think it just spoke to that, yes, my schooling was non-traditional, but I was still able to rally. I read the book Educated by Tara Westover, which there was elements of that book that resonated with me. And so I think more of the education and how she was able to achieve a lot more than I think she initially expected. So, but that was really my early childhood. I think very much the freedom to roam. I mean, like my parents were in the generation where they were not so concerned about where their children were.
I had a very similar upbringing. So yeah,
and I love it. I wish I could give that to my kids, and it's just not so much the reality in today's world. And I think obviously we have friends that live out in the country, and there's so much more freedom to roam, but it's very different. The expectations on today's parents are so hard because it's like you must be a helicopter parent. And it's like, but I don't want to. I want my kids to have the freedom to go and explore the creek and look for crawdads for hours on end and not have these time constraints. And so that's definitely a journey for me about what that looks like to, be protective of our children, but also give them freedom.
Absolutely.
And so that's really was my early upbringing.
Okay, now just to kind of touch on a couple things there. Was this like in Colorado? Were you in the Midwest, or where was this at?
All over.
Oh, okay.
So I was born in New York,
okay,
upstate New York, and my parents actually started working in is essentially called medical missionary work. I don't know if that's what it would be called today, but just that idea of like working in the alternative healing world.
Yep.
And it was not popular. I mean, now there's like amazing clinics and stuff, but this was like off the beaten path.
Yep.
Like this was kind of like, you're the weird ones.
Right.
And that's what they did. They felt very called to that. My mom has always been in health and wellness. She had gone to medical school. My dad was a physical fitness education background, and he had done some coaching for like assistant coaching for the U.S. Olympic team for some of the Olympics. And so I think they just very much into the world of health and wellness and fitness.
Right, yeah.
And so that became like the path they went. And so they worked at these wellness centers that were essentially just campuses, kind of retreats. The one in New York was the first one they worked at outside of the city, and definitely a place for healing and restoration for people. And then they got an opportunity to go to British Columbia, Canada. So lived there for a couple of years. And then they moved to Oklahoma to get another one. And then from there, they moved to Virginia, and I went off to college in Missouri. So literally, I lived in every time zone.
Yeah. Now, so and you had mentioned like correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe if I remember right, you mentioned like you came from a conservative Christian environment or home. Is that correct?
Yes.
So like when you guys moved and stuff, were you guys kind of like in a communal setting, or like surrounded kind of with like-minded believers or like-minded people with the health and all that, or not per se?
100%.
Okay.
That was very much the culture.
Yep.
It was very communal living. I mean, we weren't living in the same house. It wasn't like a commune, but it was campuses or properties where it's like they have, their wellness center that people came.
Yeah.
But then the community people the people that lived there that ran these services and ran the wellness center, they all were of the same religious affiliation, and they all ate the same, very much around vegan and vegetarian, and no coffee, no alcohol, all those types of things. And so that was that was the whole community was that way, and it was a very protective way to grow up. I feel, because it's kind of like everyone. Even now I'm like, oh, that actually sounds easier, in a way, because it's like everyone has the same values and, the same way that they look at life. But it also can be very restrictive too. So
for sure.
I feel like you kind of look at both sides of the coin.
Right. Now in regards to like kind of that living, and I want to just touch on the education part, because I'm a full-time teacher, and I want to open up a school, and I'm going to, God willing, in the future. But so I'm very kind of just fascinated by the kind of the educational part of what you just shared. So when you moved around, you were kind of in this communal setting with like-minded believers or like-minded people, and then you touched on the education a little bit. So was it, and you did mention earlier too that like parents were very involved. So the education part of your upbringing, was it basically parents then that were teaching you and educating you and kind of like in your school system, or was there actually like licensed teachers where you were at, or what did that kind of look like?
So yes and no. I think in certain places they always had a main teacher. That was a credentialed teacher that was teaching. Oftentimes the younger grades, it was usually a full-time parent, but it was really a teacher, like they were hired to teach. As far as credentialing, I'm not sure. To be honest, I remember that there were teachers who were actually legitimate teachers that were hired in and had teaching degrees that came. But the other parts of it are a little fuzzy. And of course, as an elementary school kid, I'm not going to be like, so where are your credentials? So I don't know. That's a really great question. And I think it's something where I never really wondered. But I know that there were teachers that they had, the lesson plans, and they had the stuff where it was more formal. There was a lot of informal. So the way that they incorporated parents was, there was some parents that had backgrounds in, they had master's degrees in like biology chemistry or mathematics. Right. And so they would come in, and it was almost more like twice a week this parent would come in and do specific focus studies with us. And it was very much, I'm sure it was volunteer. I can't imagine that they were paid to do that. Like their kids are in class and they're like, I will come talk to you.
For sure.
My dad was big on survival skills. And so he would come and he would do, fun little survival skill things. He was a Boy Scout, and we grew up doing survival camping, like go out in the woods with nothing and survive the night. And, that was like his thing. And so he would even come and teach some of those things, which now I'm like, that was actually really valuable, because you could end up hiking up somewhere and having those little things, I just think specialized classes was what they did. And, but yeah, I mean, as far as like, could somebody leaving that school system just go right away and take the SAT or the ACT or, a big entrance exam? Probably not. They probably would still need to study, much like I feel like a lot of my other friends that went to formal schooling had to do too. But
for sure.
I think I had to work a little harder at understanding how to be a student once I entered college.
Okay. So when you like whatever your graduation process was and you're getting ready to go to college, did they hand you like a diploma, or was that just kind of up in the air? Or?
That was just
okay.
I mean, they did. There was so because we moved so much and because there were so many different styles of schooling, it was all generally the same. Like big picture, like, oh, that looks generally the same, but it was different. Then when it came down to finishing up high school, I actually got my GED.
Okay.
So I could have because again, the credentialing of teachers, I'm not sure. It's the fuzzy detail. Right. I'm guessing there wasn't like this record of the way that I would graduate from a traditional high school. Mm-hmm. So getting my GED was what gave me that official credentialing, even though I had the years of schooling. And that's what I needed to be able to really go. I needed it for my college entrance. Right. Was my GED.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Just one more thing I want to touch on, and as much as you're comfortable sharing, that's up to you. But in regards to, and you don't have to like really be specific about like the religion or whatever, but just that spirituality, the religion that you grew up in, was that something that you feel overall was a positive experience, or do you think that was just something that you kind of had to grow up in and then you've kind of walked away from? What does that look like? Because I know especially out here in Colorado, kind of the whole spirituality and different things seems to be a pretty big topic, especially when you get into health and fitness and stuff like that. And for me personally, like I have my own personal beliefs and believe in the Bible and things like that. So what was that kind of like for you? And then like where are you at today in regards to kind of like what you grew up in? Because a lot of times when you grow up in a certain religion or a certain way, like a lot of people, including myself in the past, kind of walk away from that because it's mom and dad's, or you just don't really want anything to do with that. So where are you at like in regards to that spirituality?
That's a great question. And it's a journey.
Yeah, for sure it is.
I feel like for everybody it's a journey as you grow up and you move away from being under your parents' roof and their beliefs and values, and then you really have to sit back and like chew on it all and say like, what is mine? Where do I really feel? Like for me, it was really like, what is gospel? Like what does Jesus say? Mm-hmm. And how do I need to live my life? And what matters most? What has eternal value? Mm-hmm. And that's really the journey that I've been on because, I met my husband and we come from different backgrounds, similar, both conservative, but different religious affiliations. And so there's obviously differences within that. For sure. And so finding that common ground where we can really thrive, raise our children, be in community and be intentional and be missional on the way we live our lives. Cool. And I feel like all of those things together I would not change my upbringing because it taught me, it made me who I am today. Mm-hmm. And I think I don't feel resentful or anything. There were a lot of very fundamental, strong convictions of things that I think I attached to, I have to do those things or good things will not happen to me. Right. And so then to be able to move away from that and be like, there's grace, like I don't have to do those things in order for Jesus to love me. Right. And so to just that process for me, I think it's an ongoing, because then as my babies are growing up and they're asking questions and it's like, well, how do I represent Jesus to you? And how do I live my life in a way that is going to model what that actually means to love people well. Yeah. And I think that oftentimes and nothing against religions that have those really strong beliefs and things that maybe I oftentimes feel are not super biblical, I think that it can very much pigeonhole the way you believe and the way you see the world and the way you see the people around you because they don't believe like you.
Yeah.
And so I definitely want to come at it from a much more open-minded perspective of,
Right.
how should I really be living my life, and am I loving people well? Like, that's really important to me, and to my husband, and I even like our community around us. So
Awesome.
And a quote that goes right in line with that too is like, it's a C.S. Lewis quote that I love, and it's like, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And that just speaks volumes to me in every aspect of my life, but I think especially like your spiritual journey, is that as these things change, what does that mean for you ultimately, in the long run, and how are you going to live today forward?
Yeah, that's good. That's some good preaching right there. I appreciate you sharing that, Becky, and I just as you're just sharing a little bit about your story and specifically what you just got done talking about, Jesus with the woman at the well kind of was popping up in my mind, because there was, if you really dig into that section of scripture, I believe it's in the book of John. There's so much like culturally that Jesus in that moment kind of went against. He was talking to a woman and all these different things, and it's just a very powerful section of scripture. But we see Jesus, as him being God and just expressing that love to this woman that had all kinds of different husbands and was kind of looked down upon, I think, within kind of her community. So just having that, walking in love and having that grace and being open to people is definitely biblical, and it is of God, the God that we believe in the Bible. So that's cool. I appreciate you sharing that. So all right, so if you don't mind, Becky, just touching on a little bit, maybe going into college. Let's talk about college a little bit, that experience, and then I just really want to start kind of focusing on, again, kind of like I mentioned earlier, where you're at today, and start talking about some of that kind of healthy living and things of that nature. So what was kind of college like for you?
College was an adventure. It was like my first time away from home. I went to a very small conservative Christian college right outside of Branson, Missouri, College of the Ozarks.
Okay.
It's a work your way school, and that means that I graduated without debt. But through that journey, I think really trying to determine what I ultimately wanted to do, right? Like, that's the huge question that comes up, like, okay, what are you studying? And I didn't really know, but I knew that I really wanted to make an impact, make a difference, and that I love the world of health and wellness, but I didn't know how you would make money in that world. And so I studied business, and I just decided I'll keep it general. So I studied business administration, and then kind of a few years in, I was very inspired by just some incredible professors that very much invested in me and believed in me in a way that I didn't think was possible, given I didn't feel like a qualified student.
Right.
I think part of my upbringing and just even my own personality was like, you're not good enough really to graduate from college, and just some of the narrative that I had running in my head. And so that for me was really key, really pivotal. And I think that really helped determine ultimately my path through college, which was an emphasis in international business, which then took me abroad on a student exchange program to the Netherlands. And just really that was like my evolution of learning how to believe in myself and studying business because it's going to serve me everywhere. I was like, business can always work. If you don't know exactly, it can still help you because so much of our life is surrounded with how you run things.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so how did you, and we know from just you sharing a little bit of your backstory, health and wellness seems like it was always kind of present in your life from birth. It sounds like, it's just kind of the involvement with your parents in health and wellness, things like that. So I'm sure that was a huge part of your growing up and just being very impressionable in that as you got older. So when you went off to college and kind of those years in your 20s, was health and fitness still a really big part of your life? And did you really try to focus on that? Or was that something where you just kind of like walked away from it and came back to it? Because I really just, again, want to get to where you're at today with Beauty Counter and the health and wellness. So, but just a little bit of that backstory. Was that a big part of you in your 20s? What did that kind of look like?
It was a huge part.
Okay, cool.
It was still a big part. I loved running. I kind
Okay.
of started running. I hated running.
Okay.
My dad was a huge runner all through my childhood. Some of my fondest memories was him waking us up at 5 or 6 in the morning to get ready for our day, and his beard would be icy because he had just come back from a long run in the winter. And so that was our culture. My sister loved running, and I just never felt quite up to par. So in college, I started exploring that. I had a roommate who loved running, and I loved her, and she was really fun. And so I started running, and that was really my my way to combat the freshman 15 that comes when you're all of a sudden away from home and lifestyle is different. And I really enjoyed it. And so when I graduated and moved out to Colorado, that continued. Started doing 10Ks and all that type of stuff too. So
cool.
It definitely stayed. It has always stayed a part of my life.
Perfect. All right, so let's take a deep dive then into kind of like where you're at today. So you're the senior director at Beauty Counter. So for the listeners out there, probably more on my end than your end, that aren't familiar with Beauty Counter, don't even know what it is, if you don't mind, Becky, just kind of explaining a little bit about who Beauty Counter is, what it is, what you guys have to offer in regards to products and stuff like that. And then let's just start that evolution of talking about just kind of like the toxins and why Beauty Counter is better, what kind of like products in regards to the non-toxins that they offer, all of that type of stuff. So kind of wherever you want to go with that, I'm just going to kind of give you the platform, but let's just start in regards to like what is Beauty Counter and what they offer, and then you just kind of take it as you wish. So
okay, so Beauty Counter, first of all, I have been working with them for 3 years. And Beauty Counter has both their headquarters location in Santa Monica, California, where they have full-time people that work there. And then they also have independent consultants, health advocates. I mean, there's so many different names you can call yourself.
Right.
And Beauty Counter, in a nutshell, is they are a socially mission-based company. And their mission is to get safer products into the hands of everyone. They are based out of California, like I said, and they work specifically on 3 main pillars. So number 1 being education, empowerment. The next one is solutions. So once people know better, they obviously want to do better, and so having good solutions. And then the third one is advocacy. And advocacy is a huge part of ultimately the work that we're doing and how we are going to accomplish the mission of getting safer products into the hands of everyone. And what I mean by safer products is that right now, and this is a big platform of Beauty Counter, is there is very little regulation in the personal care industry. It's a $65 billion industry, and there is about 1.5 pages of regulation that currently regulate it. The last time those laws were updated is 1938, which is like 80 plus years ago, which is like insane. And I think people hear that and they're like, well, I want less regulation, right? Like everyone is fighting for the right type of regulation, and that really is the heart of Beauty Counter, is the right type of regulation is going to hold companies accountable in the ways that they need to be held accountable. And ultimately, we are guinea pigs. We are in a test tube as humans being tested with these chemicals that are being proven to be harmful to our health, and a lot of people have no clue. And my goal, and the reason why I partner with Beauty Counter, is because I want to empower people. I want to empower you. I want to empower everyone with information. Because when we know better, we do better.
Absolutely.
And when we have that knowledge, we can make more informed choices.
So, all right. So, in regards to Beauty Counter, so Beauty Counter offers like skin products and stuff, right? Is that? I mean, you I don't know. It's like one of my previous guests that I had on, who's one of your friends. Like, she was like starting to talk about some of the stuff. I'm like, I have no clue. So, just like again, for people like me, on probably more of my end of the audience, like just like kind of what kind of products are we talking about? Like makeup stuff, and then you were mentioned to me earlier recently they came out with like a men's line. So what are the products, and why is it important for us to know what we're putting on our body, and just maybe talk about like some of the toxins that maybe we should, if we're reading our shampoo bottle or whatever we're looking at, even like not tanning lotion, but suntan lotion, stuff like that. Like, what should we be looking for and be like, okay, because of this product, or not the product, but because of this toxin or chemical or whatever is in it, I shouldn't get it. So like, what products do you guys offer, and then what are some of the things that we should be looking out for in regards to what we're putting on our body?
So as far as the products that Beauty Counter has created, they're 6 years old.
Okay.
And they are very diligent in how they formulate products. Mm-hmm. So they will not use over 1,500 chemicals that are commonly used. They have a list called the Never List.
The Never List?
And it's essentially a list of 1,500 ingredients that they will never use. And these are not just 1,500 random ingredients. These are 1,500 ingredients that are commonly used in personal care products. And I feel like that's a really important distinction, because you will hear other companies talking about their long list of stuff they'll never use, and you actually look at those ingredients. Those are ingredients that will never actually be used in personal care. Okay. Like, they're like food things or whatever.
Right.
So I think it's really important. The one thing I love about them is they are incredibly transparent. And very like true to what the work they're doing. So screening the ingredients and everything that they're producing. They have everything. I mean, they started out with just a basic skincare line. It was just kind of that entry level, like starting out, gentle for everybody's skin. And then they just started expanding from there. Color cosmetics was something that Greg really desired to bring in, but she didn't know how, and she partnered with Christy Coleman, who's a celebrity makeup artist, she was one of the first makeup artists in the industry to begin cleaning up her makeup bag as she's working on these young models and saying, wait a second, I feel like I can no longer in good conscience be putting this makeup, knowing that there is heavy metals and preservatives and colorants and things that are known to harm health. So color cosmetics was something that it's taken them an evolution to really get that, I don't know, it's a new word to me, but the payoff and the performance and all of that. Mm-hmm. Skincare has always been their core. They also have things for babies. They have things for young children, which I use all of the products on my kids. Mm-hmm. And it was a huge thing that drew me in, because as a mom, and for anybody that is beginning to dive into the world of looking at their products, it is very, very hard. There's a word called greenwashing. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I'm not.
It's basically a marketing thing that means that a company can throw a label on something, and it came up in the food industry a little over a decade ago, where it was saying natural and all these things, and they got in trouble, and the food industry had to start relabeling and changing the way that the wording was on their marketing because it was deceiving the consumer. We are, as it was the food industry 10 years ago, in the beauty industry. We are changing, but for instance, a product can say it's organic, or that it's for sensitive skin, and there's ingredients in there that are actually known to be irritating to the skin, and it can say organic, and it can have less than 0.01% of organic in there. Right. And I think as consumers, we don't know that. Yep. You look at the package and you're like, oh, this is great. It has a green leaf on it, and it has really simple stuff, and it says like no sulfates, or it says no parabens, which you want to avoid parabens. It's a common preservative. But what does it have that it's not telling you? Okay. And I feel like that is my job as all my life. Like, this has been a passion of mine, studying nutrition and doing all the things I've done through the years, is to kind of like open people's eyes to what else should you be looking for. Right. Look past the smoke screen and really understand what are those key things. And Beauty Counter does such a beautiful job of helping the consumer accomplish that because of their standards and the things that they hold themselves accountable for, as well as the products that they produce. And their products, I would say they're a perfect marrying between the high-end department store brands and like those crunchy brands that people say, yeah, it's great that there's cleaner solutions, but they don't really perform. And so Beauty Counter says, we can show you it's possible. And that's what they've done. Cool. Is they've taken the products that people expect a level of performance, but they don't expect the level of safety and health. They're like, I'm willing to sacrifice that for this. And so Beauty Counter says, no, it's possible to have both, actually. Okay. And that's how they've done that. And then, yes, now they have a men's line. The men's line is one of their newest. They actually have a brand new anti-aging line that is using a natural retinol, which retinol is very harmful to your health. And I could go on forever about like why you don't want to use that on your skin and how it's actually linked to skin tumors and lesions and irritation. But many people use it. Most clients that I talk to are like, oh, I can't give up my retinol products. They actually make me look younger. And what Beauty Counter discovered is that there are botanicals, and they came up with a blend called Retinatural, which is essentially giving you the results of a retinol product without the health negative harm effect. Because many people know this, many people don't, but retinol products should never be used by pregnant or nursing women. My personal philosophy is that if something should not be used when you're pregnant or nursing, you should not ever use it. Men included, because men are part of the equation of fertility. And so that is a huge thing for me. So I'm like, yes, you should not be using these things. And so to now have a solution for that. And that line actually launches tomorrow. So it's called Counter Time. So Counterman is our men's line. We have the kids line, babies, skincare, body care, shampoo, conditioner. And then we have now this new anti-aging line. And then, of course, our makeup and color cosmetics.
Cool. All right. So now, like, kind of the education part, that's kind of like what you're doing just on this platform of the podcast, just kind of sharing some information with people. Now, the solution then, so kind of like Beauty Counter will look at something maybe that, you know, a normal company with a normal product is doing, and then you guys will kind of like, okay, how can we bring that to market but in a healthier manner? Is that a fair way to put it, like the solution part of things?
Absolutely. Looking at trends, looking at things that are popular in the industry right now, understanding the consumer and what they're looking for, looking at other countries and, what are their skincare trends and what are people, asking for as far as results and that type of thing. So they really are very trend setting. They oftentimes bring things to market and then a bunch of other people will kind of come and show, oh, we have it too. And so even their sunscreen, you mentioned, sunscreen lotion. That is one that right now there is so many chemical sunscreens, and that's the one thing too, is many people don't understand that there is a difference in sunscreens. There's a chemical blocking sunscreen, and that is what absorbs into your skin and basically just helps your skin not get burned. And then there's the physical blocking, which is the mineral sunscreens that sit on the surface of your skin and protect your skin from the damaging rays. And right now in Hawaii and recently in Florida, oxybenzone, which is one of the most popular sunscreen filters for chemical filters, it has been banned. So Hawaii, I think by 2020, I'm not sure exact dates, but I know that they're in the process of rolling out where that sunscreen is not even going to be allowed to be sold because of what it's doing, damaging the coral reefs. So as we think of that, we're like, well, what is it doing to us and on our skin, which our skin is our largest organ? So even them providing solutions that perform, because most of the time people hear zinc oxide, they're like, ugh, like the white stuff surfers wear. The white nose, the sticky, you can't get it off. And so Beauty Counter again rose to the occasion and said, how can we make this perform the way the chemical sunscreens perform, which is what makes people avoid the mineral sunscreens? And they did it. They cracked the code on how to make that happen, and now there are other companies that are following suit. But I think it's really important, if you're listening and you're like, hey, what sunscreen should I avoid? And it's really looking for the avobenzene, the oxybenzone. There's all these really big words, and they say the chemical sunscreen filters on there. And it's important to just educate yourself. The Environmental Working Group is an incredible resource. It's a grassroots organization that specifically focuses on rating chemicals and how they are in our personal care products, 0, 1 being the best, 10 being the worst, and really being able to look at your favorite products and really starting with what sits on your skin is really where I tell everyone to start, because it can feel very overwhelming. So somebody hears like their sunscreen and they're like, okay, well, I just bought 20 tubes of sunscreen for my beach to Florida, my beach vacation to Florida. And it's like, well, where do you go from there? And it's like, okay, progress over perfection always. What are those little changes you can make that are going to make the ripple effect over the long term? And that's how I work with every single client, is on a big picture. Somebody will come to me, hey, I have this skin issue. And I say, okay, let's talk about your skin. Let's also talk about what's happening internally. What is happening stress-wise? What are little changes you can make that are ultimately going to give you the results you ultimately want? Which is true of everything, right? Absolutely. Fitness, it's like baby steps forward. As long as you're always moving forward, you're getting to where you want to go, even if it takes you longer than, somebody else.
For sure.
So that's where having those solutions and making those small changes is where, people can really start to see the biggest health impact.
Okay, so for people out there that have no clue, because this is within probably the last couple of years is something that I really realized. Like I was listening to a podcast and they said, just the chemicals and toxins and stuff that are in like your shampoos and stuff like that can lower testosterone. I'm like, whoa, it's like, I don't want that. You know what I mean? So can you just, like, for somebody that has no clue about like anything that we're discussing today in regards to toxins and stuff that's in our beauty care products, like how bad is it, Becky? Like because I changed all my stuff because of like just the one statement, like, these shampoos, like, it can lower your testosterone. I was like, all right, dude, like I'm done. But like we're putting stuff like, like if you have babies and kids and all that, like we're putting all these different things on them. Like how bad is it? Can you just kind of explain that, please? Just for people to really realize like how crazy it is and messed up it is.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, there's just very little regulation in the industry. And so what that means is that companies will find a product that works and they're like, we're just going to go with it, or it's less expensive. I think one of the most shocking things that I learned kind of in this journey of really understanding more about what we're putting on our skin, I'd always focus on what goes in our body, then really diving into the world of what goes on our skin, is that in the EU, they have really strict standards. Out of all of the chemicals, so I mentioned Beautycounter's Never list of the 1,500 chemicals that are not used or allowed in their products. So in the EU, 1,400 of those 1,500 are currently banned. They're not allowed. There's another 100 or so that Beautycounter still was like, they're questionable, we're not going to use them. Canada is 600, 700 and rising. They're intentionally trying to grow that list of what they ban in their personal care products and what's allowed in their country. In the United States, 30. That's how many chemicals out of that list are currently banned. Wow. And so when you look at products even formulated by the exact same company in the European Union versus in the United States, they will be different formulas. There will be ingredients that they don't use in Europe that they are using in the exact same product in the United States because there's no one demanding different. And that's where I say that we as consumers, we vote with our dollars. Every single time you spend money, you vote with your dollars. And so I think that we have to understand that we have incredible buying power. We have incredible transformative in like the consumer market that I think a lot of people don't understand, that when you stop buying something, how that changes the marketplace and how it communicates to the manufacturers. And so that's what I would say is that when it's a big problem. Most people don't even know that it's a problem. Most people have no clue that what they're using on their skin can be a problem. But what I say is like, just start with those little things. Start with what sits on your skin all day, the lotions, the cosmetics, and start from there. Be less concerned about the shampoo or the conditioner that you're washing off, because it's the toxic impact is lower. But what sits on your skin is the most important. And that's ultimately what affects the endocrine system, the hormonal system. That's ultimately what lends itself to allergies and irritations. And now it's being linked to environmental factors that are leading to so much more cancer and asthma and allergies and things that we did not have before. And environmental factors are what's pointing that. And that's like such a big part of like my heart behind even the partnership for me with Beautycounter, because this is so much bigger for me than Beautycounter. They just so perfectly align with like my ultimate life mission, which is to really help people understand that you can live a healthier life without going crazy.
Beautiful. All right, so how does Beautycounter then go through like all of their testing, and how do they kind of go through that process of formulating like their next product, or how do they kind of do that creation process?
So they work with the Environmental Working Group, so it's a third-party vetting group that actually they now are an EWG verified brand, which is Environmental Working Group verified brand. And what that means is that they fit within their they're 2 or less on what their products, how they rate. So that's one. The other thing too is that they've partnered with Tufts University. There is actually a research group that is looking at the ingredients specifically, and even down to when ingredients are combined, which I find incredibly fascinating and I get very geeked out about. When you actually think about like, so all these chemicals are innocuous. They're like, oh, they're all known to be fine for human health. But then what about when they're combined? And so that's where Beauty Counter is even taking it to that level. And they do things like, as they're formulating, they are screening those things 3 times during production for contaminants, for heavy metals, for things that are on their never list that they say won't be there. 2 crazy examples is one, there was they were doing a third screening of a product, and it kept coming up with a chemical that is on our never list. And they said, well, this is not okay. Like, where is this coming from? And they kept going back to the formulation, back to the ingredients, and what's happening. And they discovered that the manufacturer was actually cleaning the vat that it was being made with a chemical that was then transferring to the product. And so they said, stop. They actually had to stop production of one of their most popular face cleansers because they had to say, sorry, we have to go back to the drawing board. Right. This chemical cannot be present. On the another side, they have a rosewater mist, and they are again doing this testing as they're screening, and they discovered that there was very high amounts of phthalates, which phthalates something you want to avoid. It's what makes fragrance stick. It's also what makes plastic bendy. It's so prevalent in our environment, and it affects our hormonal system. And so they were like, this is on our never list. This cannot be in this. What's happening? They go all the way back to the farm where the rose heads were being picked, and the farmers were putting them in plastic grocery sacks and sticking them out in the sun. And so they said, okay, scratch that. Right. So they started putting those rose heads in canvas bags. And they said, let's provide the farmers, which then ultimately, which is my heart, I love this, is it is positively impacting those farms. It's positively impacting that environment there because now there's less plastic sitting around. And so that's just a little bit about how they go about creating these high-performing, safer products.
Okay, cool. Now, Beauty Counter is MLM, correct?
It is, yeah. They call themselves a direct retail brand because they really meet the consumer where they are. But yes, in the traditional sense, you could say yes, they're a multi-level marketing company because I joined under a leader, and then I now have a team of over 70 women that work under me, and then they're also growing their own businesses. But it's in the sense where you as the consumer, you could choose to shop with me as a consultant. You could choose to go directly to their website. You could also go directly to one of their retail locations or one of their seasonal pop-ups that they have across the country. You are not tied to me as a consultant. You're also not tied to one way of shopping. And they do incredible strategic partnerships with really high-end brands. And so what that does is it lends itself to a little bit different look and feel of the traditional multi-level marketing company. Greg Renfrew, the founder and CEO of Beauty Counter, she really wanted it to look very different and really kind of look at the consumer model. How do we as consumers shop now? And it's really through influencers. So much of how we consume and what we purchase is through influencers. And so she recognized that and knew that this story is best told person to person. And that the story of clean beauty, it's hard to resonate in what is such a saturated marketplace. It's a huge industry. Yeah.
Now, we were talking a little bit before we turned on the mic or whatever about, and I might not get the terms correct or whatever, but there's like a Beauty Counter, actual like brick and mortar store here in Denver, and then you said the only other one is in New York City. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
So that's really cool. Like we have one of those in Denver, but like why do you think? And I mean, I think most of us probably understand why New York City, but why Denver? Why not like LA? Because it's based out of California. It sounds like Beauty Counter. So why not like LA or why not Austin, Texas? Why has Denver been kind of chosen as a place to have a brick and mortar for Beauty Counter?
Because Denver is the best city in the country. Why else?
Right.
I think it's the market. It's the consumer. I think they're ready for it.
For sure.
And I think there is a demand for this type of thing. I think people here in Colorado are so much more open-minded.
Absolutely.
To the idea of, a little bit outside the box thinking as far as what they've always done. So I think it really was just the market was ready for it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Now, in regards to advocacy, the kind of the third pillar for Beauty Counter, I know from my understanding they've been trying to work on some legislation stuff, getting some things changed. So if could you just share, Becky, a little bit more about the advocacy of Beauty Counter and kind of like what your guys' focus is in regards to that, and maybe what some of that legislation that you guys are trying to change or correct, or however you want to word that. What is kind of the advocacy part of Beauty Counter?
So the advocacy part of Beauty Counter is, I think, one of the most intriguing aspects of what they do, because essentially you tell a company that's a private company, hey, we want you to have more regulation. They're going to say, why? That's crazy. But what Greg Renfrew has really proven, and with her incredible team, we have a VP of Social and Environmental Responsibility, and her name is Lindsay Dahl, and she is really our advocate and our boots on the ground in Washington. And so what they have done is they've said we can be pro-commerce and also pro-regulation in the right way. And so they have co-sponsored, they've helped sponsor and get on the docket for the Personal Care Safety Act. And that's something that is kind of constantly in review. I don't have all the detail on, but I know there's been some things that have passed in California recently. There's also, all the way in Washington, D.C., just even the landscape there has changed over even just the past 5 years since they really started pushing for the advocacy. But the mission behind the advocacy is that idea of that when the tide rises, all ships sail. And so you have this industry that is grossly underregulated. You have people and consumers that are becoming more informed. We have so much access to information now. And we're starting to ask questions. And so saying, our legislators and our senators and our congressmen, they work for us.
Right.
And that we have a voice and we can make an impact. And when we say there's a problem, we should go out and speak to that problem and what that issue is. We should not say, oh, we just need to keep our voices quiet.
Right,
and so Beauty Counter's mission is let's turn up the volume.
There you go.
You know, they even say it's this t-shirt I'm wearing is this time it's personal. They also say things like, take the job, we need more voices, because ultimately the goal behind what they're doing is that if you can get more people talking and having this conversation, then you're going to have even more on the governmental side paying attention, because that's what consumers are demanding. So yeah, they take consultants to Washington, D.C., they meet with their state representatives. Myself as a representative, like a consultant with Beauty Counter, and really anyone, you could do it.
Yeah.
But I can go and I can meet with my state representatives.
Absolutely.
And I can say, hey, this is something that matters to me.
Yeah.
So just being able to have that platform, I think, is really cool, the way they have woven it into their business model, and really saying that we have an opportunity to really change an industry for the better.
So Beauty Counter, from my understanding, just the information you share with me, is really trying to be that leader within the beauty product industry. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. All right, so I want to touch on kind of because in the introduction, I said that you're a healthy living advocate. So what is healthy living to you, Becky?
Healthy living to me is finding balance within the world of what can seem like a whirlwind of chaos. There's so many things coming at you all the time. Right. You should do this diet, you should do this workout, you should live this way, you should wake up at this time, you should eat this, you should drink this. And so my goal is how can you navigate what is the healthiest, most balanced life for you? And really tuning into what your heart and soul needs in the world of healthy living. Because just like someone may say, I never touch French fries, or I'll never eat this, or I'll never do that, I think, why not find a good balance within that? And having food freedom. I have so many friends that have struggled with eating disorders and have really gone off the ledge on different tangents of healthy living. And so for me, I'm where is that happy medium? Where is that balance that allows you to still love life, enjoy family and community and sharing meals, as well as enjoying activity for the enjoyment of it, and not because it's something you have to do or you won't get up the next day. And so for me, it really is just what is that place of feeling healthy in each season? Right. Because in each season it changes. As a mom, I loved working out hard. And I became a mama, and I was wait a second, my body can't handle this intensity. Right. And as I was grappling with that because I didn't want to give it up. I want to work out so hard.
Right.
And I just realized that's not showing my body grace, and that's not caring well for my body. And so how can I do this well and still stay active and fit and healthy within the constraints of what can feel like constraints of new motherhood and then life with little ones. And ultimately, women's bodies go through so much change that I feel like we do ourselves such a disservice when we say we need to be exactly as we were before.
Right.
There is nothing about a new mom that will ever be exactly as it was before. First and foremost, their body. So
cool. Balance then seems like, from what you're just sharing, is kind of like what healthy living is to you, right? Just the pursuit of balance and adjusting through the different seasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Now, you mentioned the word community as you were sharing a little bit about what healthy living is to you. So in regards to community and connection, but also just a little bit more specific than that, in regards to mentorship and coaching, how valuable has that been in your life? And then also, for you personally, do you do some sort of coaching or mentorship? I know that kind of goes on within Beauty Counter, but maybe just outside of Beauty Counter. What does that look like for you in regards to how important is it for you to get that, the mentorship and the coaching, and then how important is it to you to provide that to other people?
So the mentorship for me, I have always had people in my life that I've really looked up to. Ever since I was very young, I always had, my mom and dad encouraged it actually, which as a parent, I really admire that because I'm no, I want my kids just to listen to me.
Right.
I don't want someone else influencing them in that way. And so that's always been a big part of my life. I think also the community I grew up in was very much lent itself to that.
For sure.
And then as I got older, my professors and that type of thing. And then I've never had a life coach. I think I love it. I love the idea of it. I've just never personally had one.
Yeah.
And I'm a really big proponent of mental health, of really looking at all the elements and how those all play into ultimately healthy living. And so for me, seeing a therapist is important, just because I think having that neutral third party that can really speak into those areas that are struggle. And so that is kind of I always love having kind of older people that I'm looking up to, and not even necessarily age older,
right?
But just people that have maybe walked a path that I'm trying to tread down. And so then also on the flip side of that is that I never have seen myself as a leader or someone that would be able to mentor or coach or speak into people's lives. And I kind of have been thrown into that with Beauty Counter, intentionally. Yeah. I have intentionally grown my team.
Absolutely.
And that has been some of the most beautiful personal development that I never expected would happen. And it is incredible to see people when they're really working towards their ultimate life goal, whatever that is, and being willing to be vulnerable or to try new things or be challenged or to face their fears. And to journey alongside of them with that is so cool because
right.
I'm it's not about me at all. And I personally love that. I kind of don't want it to be about me.
Right, yeah.
But how can I partner and how can I cheer you on and how can I help you see the best side of yourself or see a different way of getting an income?
Right.
What does this residual income look like? Diversifying your income, and the challenges and fears that come with that.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned mental health. And that's a huge topic in our society and culture right now with just a lot of different things that are going on. How is mental health and really us as individuals taking care of our own personal mental health, how valuable or how important is that for us and how do we do that? Because, there's the mental health in regards to us personally, but then, different people have different mental health issues, and then have to go see a counselor or to a doctor. There's that type of stuff. But let's just stay on the topic. For us as individuals, how can we take care of our mental health, and what does that look like for an individual?
So for me, I see that our culture and society is very individualistic.
Yeah.
And I think we're very focused on ourselves, and so I shy away from that thing of just focus on yourself, only take care of yourself. As a mom, it doesn't resonate because
right.
that would never be my reality and I would not want it to be.
Right.
But I do think that there is something incredibly empowering to the human psyche when you invite someone into your struggle and you can share your struggle in a safe space. And I think that so often, especially for me, my personality is I'm very in my head.
Right.
It's really hard to get that out. And then it's also very hard to get it out to someone that maybe is not like so invested, like my husband or my siblings or a best friend. And so I think when you can bring someone else into that in a third party safe environment, it can really lend itself to such restorative healing and a place where you can just simply process out loud and be challenged and held accountable for your thought patterns.
Okay. So vulnerability, would that be kind of a word?
Absolutely.
To be able to have that vulnerability with another individual or a group of people, that's really important to that mental health. That's kind of what you were saying,
Absolutely.
right?
And I think that vulnerability, I mean, Brené Brown, her huge platform is all about vulnerability.
For sure.
And I just get broken when I listen to her stuff because it's like, yes, we all have such a wall we build up. And I think there is a trend towards saying embrace your vulnerability. Like that actually is what will allow you to connect even more deeply with those around you. And so, yeah, I think vulnerability is a key, like a key component to being a leader, to being just a good friend, a good parent, being able to share like, hey, I'm not perfect. I totally screwed this up and this is how and this is why and this is how I'm working through it. So that when people around you face those same things, they can maybe draw on that story you shared to then feel like, oh, like that almost gave me the strength to do this.
For sure. And for me, vulnerability, and I don't know if it's a guy thing, I think it might be a little bit more than for the females, but it's hard. I mean, it really is. I really try to, on my personal Instagram, I try to put out my writings and stuff, and that's a really kind of a deep look into who I am and stuff, but it's not easy. It can be kind of scary. But like you said, I think it's a very powerful thing. For us to be vulnerable and just to kind of put ourselves out there and really not care like what people are going to say or think. So in regards to fear, what is a fear that you've really had to work through and overcome throughout your life, Becky?
The fear of talking to people.
Okay.
Which I think people knowing me now are like, you just seem so friendly and warm and chatty and you can have a conversation with anybody. And anybody who knew me when I was little, I mean, I was literally petrified to talk to people. Painfully shy. Painfully. I remember in college, I had public speaking 101, and I was in like full-blown panics, just knowing I had to take that class and that class would require me to talk in front of people. And what over the years, and now in my late 30s, I'm like, I don't care as much what people think. It's just, I've lived life. It's fine. I'll survive it. I've been there, done that. But just realizing that like God has given me a unique story and that there are people that maybe it's just one person, like even my Instagram. I've had people that when I first started and I only had a couple hundred followers and people were like, you share so much. And I was like, yeah, but honestly, if I'm just sharing to one person, that's enough. If like maybe I make one person have a smile on their face, like that's enough for me. And so that really is where it started to evolve for me of being less fearful. And realizing that I might have a story to share that someone else might be encouraged by. And I really love encouraging people. So I had to get over that and realize that I'm really trying to hide behind these unnecessary fears that ultimately were holding me back from what I may be needing to do. So this podcast alone, I mean, I'm just like, why does he want to talk to me? Like, what is happening?
That's the cool thing about, the platform that I have with this podcast is it is just a platform for people to simply share their story. And like I told you before we turned on the mic, it's like we're just having a conversation. You know what I mean? As opposed to like more of an interview or something like that type of a podcast. But that's something that in starting this podcast, I really wanted is just like to provide that platform for people to share their story, to positively impact those who listen, because we all have different stories. We all come from different backgrounds, and like something that you have gone through can positively impact somebody else that's currently going through that or has gone through it. You know what I mean? Like the power of the spoken word, the power of the human story is amazing. So, and I think too, just like for you and your faith, like just knowing that God has you, and I know there's that scripture, I believe it's in 2 Timothy where it talks about, for God has not given us a spirit of fear. You know what I mean? So just to be able to rest in that, I think, for somebody like you and myself is is very, very important too. So, all right, so we've been going a little bit over an hour, so we're gonna finish things up here, Becky. Anybody that is married and is a mom and things of that nature, or a dad, on my podcast, I always want to give them the opportunity to kind of talk about the importance of marriage to them, and then also the importance of motherhood or fatherhood, what have you. So what does your husband mean to you, and then what has becoming a mother and motherhood meant to you, and how has that kind of changed you and maybe changed your perspective on life?
Wow, it's a lot of questions
all
packed into one. Just wrap this all up with
just start with your husband
with a pretty little bow.
Finish with the kids.
I will say that marriage is one of the most refining, challenging, and incredibly rewarding relationships I have ever had. I think it's a lot harder than people allude to, but I think also when you get into real vulnerable conversations with other couples, you realize it's the same. Everyone has the same struggle, and it's just like marriage is not easy, and you have to fight for it. You have to fight for it. You have to work for it. You have to cling to your spouse in moments when you want to run away. You have to lean in when everything in you is telling you to lean away. And you have to be willing to be held accountable for things that maybe you don't want to be held accountable for. And I'll say that, like, my husband is one of my biggest supporters. He is one of my biggest challengers. He is one who's never shies away from really speaking truth and really kind of pointing me in the right direction, which can oftentimes come at my resistance, because I'm like, I don't want you telling me those things. And I really appreciate that. I very much value him. I value his views of the world and the way he thinks outside the box, and that really has challenged me, because I'm safety and security, and I want comfort, and I want ease. And so to really be challenged in those thought processes and realizing how it really is almost like confining me, not really allowing me to live a free life. And so I really appreciate that about him. And for my kids, I mean, becoming a mom I did not know what to expect. I've always been a caretaker of children. I'm the second oldest of 7 kids, and so some of my siblings even feel like my babies, So it's like when I went into having kiddos, I was like, I've kind of already raised a few. I feel like I've kind of been down this path. But when it's your own children, your whole world is rocked. And I was not one of those moms that fell in love with my babies as soon as they were born. I loved my babies. But I was like, you're a weird little alien. I need to get to know you. And now I will say the same thing as with my marriage, is that it gets sweeter with time. Like, I am more in love with my husband now than I was when I first got married. We've lived life together, and he's just time and time again. Same with my kids. Like, as their personalities develop, I now find myself thinking, like, who are they going to be when they grow up? How can I help them really become that adult that they are meant to be, and how can I partner with God in this, because ultimately they're God's kids, not mine. And that whole fear thing, like, that's huge. And as a parent, to really step back and say, I can't live in fear. I can't, because these babies are God's, not mine.
Beautiful. All right, so before I ask you the last question, Becky, is there anything that I haven't asked you, or we haven't touched on, that you would like to share with the audience? If not, that's okay. But is there anything that you would like to kind of speak to before we wrap it up finally here?
I can't think of anything specifically.
No, that's cool.
I mean, because I think I had a couple of final thoughts, but
okay. Well, let me ask you this question, and then with this question, you can just maybe tie in your final thoughts. Is that cool?
Sure.
Okay. So the last question I have for you is, what sets your soul on fire?
So I would say for me, it's really being able to see lives transformed because of information that they are learning, the power of impact, great or small, is really key for me, of just everyone understanding that you have an impact, that you are an influencer. And I think that we can so much tie people in the social media world. It's like, I'm an influencer because I have 100,000 followers. And it's like, no, you're an influencer by the way you care for your neighbors. You're an influencer by the way that you connect with those friends that you meet in your community. And so for me, it's like, I really get excited when I realize really my impact and the influence I have, great or small, and then also when I see other people realizing their impact, and then how can I maybe even shine light on that for them, or shine light on that for other people around me.
Right. And does that kind of tie in with some of your final thoughts, or do you have a couple of thoughts that you want to kind of share with the listeners to close it out?
I think the biggest thing with that too is just that I feel like we so often live within these like constraints of this linear life, right? Like you grow up, you graduate, you go to college, and then you search for your spouse, you get married, you have kids, and then if things don't happen in that order, then life is kind of chaos, right? So I see it as something where now that I've achieved some of those different milestones in my life is learning to let go so much more than I did before. And that idea of we keep things so precious in just like our thought processes. And so I think when you can really just let that go and have your hands be open and saying, how can I be used? How can I serve? How can I love? How can I humbly be with the people around me? And that alone can be like living out my purpose. And then the other thought I have was that the only absolute is time. That we all have the same like time in our day and how we spend our time, and that you might see somebody who has accomplished a bunch of things and think I should be like that, when really it's like, but what are you doing today to take yourself to that next place that you feel called to? Cool.
Very, very well put. All right, so Becky, that wraps up our conversation for today. Now, I'm going to give you just the opportunity in regards to anybody that wants to get involved with Beauty Counter or find out more information about Beauty Counter. If somebody wants to contact you or kind of follow along with what you got going on in regards to maybe Instagram, social media, websites, where can people kind of go to get more information?
So the first place you can go is Instagram. That's easiest. I mean, that's a great place to connect with me. And my handle is Becky.Glaze, Glaze, just really simple. And I share kind of all the things, but it is a great way to connect with me. And then I also, if you're on Facebook, I also have a Clean Beauty with Becky group on Facebook that is open to anybody that is interested in learning more. And then, of course, you can always email me at hello@beckyglaze.com to find out more information.
Perfect. All right, Becky, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule today to share your story with myself and the listeners. It's greatly appreciated. So I'm just going to send you guys out. Thank you very much, listeners, for hanging out with Becky and myself today on the 127 Fit podcast. If you want to get a hold of me, you can find me on Instagram. For the podcast, it's at 127 Fitness. My personal Instagram is at QVars. Facebook is at Quentin Vars. And if you guys would do me a huge favor, it'd be greatly appreciated that you would leave a 5-star rating and review for the podcast. If you think you'd be a great guest, or if you have a friend or an acquaintance that you think would be a great guest or guest, please send me an email or give this email to them. The email is 127fit@gmail.com. Share a little bit of information about yourself, and we will go from there. If you're finding value, which I know you are in the guests and that I'm bringing on the podcast and the podcast overall, if you would just do me a huge favor and share that episode or episodes on your Facebook and Instagram stories, that would be greatly appreciated, and use the hashtag #BeSomeoneToFollow. And per the usual, I will leave you with Proverbs 24:10, which states, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. This time, until next time, I will catch you guys later.